This is Principles of Management, Leadership, Part 2. Most of the concepts are from Robbins and Coulter textbook, but they're fairly universal to Principles of Management and Organizational Behavior classes. My name is Mike Knudstrup. I have an MBA and PhD. I've been teaching I've been teaching management topics for about 15 years. And I also have about 20 years part-time real estate experience. So we'll be getting into these concepts: leader-member exchange, Hershey and Blanchard's situational theory of leadership, transactional, transformational, and charismatic leadership, the different types of power that leaders can have, men and women in leadership, and also substitutes for leadership. All right, leader-member exchange theory of leadership says that a leader develops an in-group and an out-group through the result of time and exchanges. All right, how does that develop? Well, maybe it's partly due to the benefits to the leaders and the in-group people. All right, there's always a lot of work to be done, and a leader needs some trusted people to get that done. Maybe there aren't enough trusted folks, so the leader develops an inner circle of people, or in-group, people that he or she can trust to get the job done. So those are the benefits to the leader. There's always more work that can be done by one person. The benefits to the in-group people, they're often on an inside track, to promotions. They're on the inner loop in terms of information as well. But of course, there are costs to being in the in-group. Often you're asked to go above and beyond in your performance, and it's often extra work. So, like I'm asking here to you, is it okay, do you think, to have an in-group and an out-group? And you might answer, well, it's human nature. Pretty much anything I've ever been a part of. I brought up like this basketball pitcher. There's been an in-group. In basketball, you have the top 7 players. They're in the in-group, and they're often the non-starters, and the non-players are in the out-group. So it might be just normal human nature to have this in-group, people that are close to you, versus an out-group. Perhaps a leader can try to bring all in the in-group, but maybe some of the out-group people don't want to work as hard. All right. Maybe when it's not okay to have an out-group is when it's based more on favoritism, whether you share the same interests or the same activities. But if it's based on merit, it seems fairly acceptable. All right, and people have to generally work hard and produce well to be a part of the in-group. I want to talk about another theory known as Hershey and Blanchard's situational theory. All right, and a rather crude drawing here, but it's based on the ability and willingness of followers. All right, so this is a contingency or situational leadership model. And it says that the leader needs to adapt to the situation. If a follower is low in ability and willingness, the leader does autocratic management, takes charge, tells the follower what to do. All right. If the follower is low in ability but high in willingness, maybe the leader would take a coaching perspective towards teaching the follower, because they're low in ability but they are willing. All right, again, this is a situational model. What the leader does depends on the situation. Later on, as a follower's been there for a while, perhaps they get higher on ability, but they lose some of their motivation. They become less willing. At this point, maybe the leader would take a participative role with the follower. That is, they would allow the follower to participate in how things are done. Maybe you tell them what needs to be done, but you let them determine how to do it to increase that willingness. And after a follower's been there a long time, maybe they're pretty committed to the organization, they have high ability. If they're high in ability and willingness, what would you do? Well, if you're Hershey and Blanchard, you'd say you just delegate the task to them. You'd let them go at it because, they're pretty motivated and they're pretty skilled. That's Hersey and Blanchard's situational or contingency theory of leadership. All right, some cutting edge or current approaches to leadership. One is making the differentiation between transactional leadership and transformational leadership. Okay, so transaction leadership is based on the exchange. What's in it for me? Okay, you do this for me, and then I'll do that for you. It's a quid pro quo, if we might say in Latin. All right, transformational leadership gets people to go above and beyond by transforming them. Maybe there's something about the cause that gets them to go higher and above. Soar with the eagles, as my picture might imply here. I want to make a little different distinction between this and charismatic leadership. Transformational leadership, the followers are transformed. There's something about the leader, the message, and the goal that transforms the followers. Charismatic leaders, the focus is on the charisma, all right, the personal charisma of the leader. So transformational is focused on the followers more, and charismatic leadership is focused on the leader. So what are some of the characteristics of charismatic leaders? They tend to be very good communicators. And they tend to be very self-confident, all right, in their communication. They often take risks, and they have a vision that people are often very much attracted to. So this leads me to the next question. Some of the best and worst leaders in history have been charismatic leaders. The dark side is there is no in between usually with charismatic leaders. You're either with them or you're against them. Napoleon maybe being a pretty famous charismatic leader. You can think of maybe many others, that were many other charismatic leaders that had good or not so good results. You might think of maybe Hitler, World War II. He was a pretty charismatic leader. Other negative charismatic leader. And maybe more recent history, Martin Luther King might be considered a positive charismatic leaders. But an ongoing issue with people who follow charismatic leaders is, how do you balance the head and the heart? Because charismatic leaders tend to lead by emotion. But when we're just led by emotion, logic does not necessarily follow. So, in terms of a follower's point of view, I think we need to really balance what and how we are led in order to avoid this dark side that charismatic leaders sometimes take us on. All right, there are different types of power that leaders rely on. And the last one that I just talked about, charismatic leaders rely on referent power, which attaches to the person. Expert power is, as the name implies, it's expertise or technical skill. Reward power is the ability to give rewards. The leader gives rewards to get people to do things. Coercive power is the ability to punish. Do this or else what? Or else I'll fire you. Something like that, for example. Legitimate power comes with the position. Legitimate power, say a leader might have the legitimate power to do evaluations or to make out work schedules and that kind of thing. Maybe the idea is that a leader needs all these, but followers might prefer different. Some followers prefer their leader to be expert more than anything else. Others prefer a charismatic or referent power. Some just might prefer a leader who uses their legitimate power to organize and get the work done. A good leader, I think, probably relies on all these to some degree. Okay. Are there gender differences in leadership? People tend to at least believe so. Or maybe we're becoming more of a gender-neutral world in terms of leadership. but some of the research findings tend to indicate that women tend to be more democratic and participative or involve employees more in their work, unless they're in a male-dominated job like construction, where women seem to feel the pressure to act in what we might say is a more stereotypically male take charge way. Women tend to be more transformational in how they lead people, and men tend to be transactional. Remember, transactional being do this or else, or do this, excuse me, for me, and I'll give you that on your part. You might say, you scratch my back, I scratch yours. Well, I'm sure you've maybe aspire to a leadership position, and one reason why is, well, it pays well, okay? And that's my idea here about substitutes for leadership. You know, leadership can be pretty expensive. Leaders get paid well. If we can do some things to reduce the need for leadership, and then we can have fewer leaders. You know, what are the characteristics in followers that might allow them to be self-led? What are the characteristics in a job that would encourage people to lead themselves? Or maybe what are organizational characteristics that allow people to lead themselves? You know, if a company can reduce the number of its leaders, then they're going to spend less and hopefully make more profits. All right, well, when we're talking about this, if you think of followers who are well trained or independent, then maybe you would be thinking of a way that followers could lead themselves. Jobs that are often rewarding in and of themselves, you know, that people who enjoy the work will require less leadership. And also jobs maybe that have incentives. You can think of maybe like a salesperson who gets commission. The job itself leads people. Characteristics in the organization, maybe there are very cohesive work teams. A cohesive work team, get that A right, might lead itself. So substitutes for leadership is, I put it at the end of the chapter here because, although we emphasize the importance of leadership, maybe it's also good to look at ways and situations where we don't need it quite as much. All right, so that's the end of the leadership chapter. And we'll close it off for now.